Marcus Chen had always believed that love would find him in a coffee shop, maybe at a bookstore, or during one of those perfectly orchestrated meet-cutes that seemed to happen to everyone except him. He never imagined it would involve breaking into a greenhouse at 2 a.m., wearing all black like some sort of botanical burglar, with a man he'd known for exactly 3 hours whispering sweet nothings about photosynthesis in his ear. But here he was. "Are you absolutely certain this is legal?" Marcus whispered, fumbling with what appeared to be a surprisingly sophisticated lock-picking kit. "Define legal," came the response from Jamie Rodriguez, who was currently suspended upside down from a skylight, his curly hair defying gravity in the most distracting way possible. "Because technically we're not stealing anything. We're liberating an endangered species. That's what every plant thief says." "I'm not a plant thief." Jamie's indignant whisper somehow managed to convey deep offense while maintaining the appropriate volume for covert operations. "I'm a botanical conservationist with questionable methods." Marcus paused in his lock-picking attempts, which, frankly, were going about as well as his last 3 relationships, and looked up at the man who had somehow convinced him to commit what was definitely a felony. Jamie's dark eyes sparkled with mischief even in the dim moonlight, and there was something about the way he talked about plants that made Marcus want to learn the Latin names of every flower in existence. This was either the beginning of a beautiful relationship or an excellent way to get matching prison uniforms. Chapter 1. How it all began. The incident with the succulent. 6 hours earlier, Marcus had been having a perfectly normal Tuesday, which in his case meant reorganizing his bookshelf by color. Again, avoiding his mother's calls about his non-existent dating life, and trying to keep his one remaining houseplant alive through sheer force of will and an alarming amount of plant food. The plant, a succulent his sister had given him with the optimistic name of Fernando, was not thriving. In fact, Fernando appeared to be staging some sort of slow-motion suicide, turning an alarming shade of yellow despite Marcus's careful attention to every plant care article on the internet. "You're overwatering it," said a voice behind him as he stood in the gardening section of Morrison's Home and Garden Center, holding a bottle of plant fertilizer and looking like a man contemplating the mysteries of the universe. Marcus turned to find himself face to face with the most beautiful man he'd ever seen in the succulent section of a garden center, which was admittedly a very specific category, but still. The stranger had warm, brown skin, unruly dark curls that looked like they'd never met a comb they couldn't defeat, and was holding what appeared to be a small cactus like it was a beloved pet. "I'm sorry," Marcus managed, his brain temporarily short-circuiting at the combination of unexpected human interaction and the stranger's absolutely devastating smile. "You're succulent," the man said, nodding toward the photo on Marcus's phone, which was displaying a rather pathetic image of Fernando in his death throes. "You're overwatering it. They're desert plants. They like neglect." "Well, that explains why all my relationships fail," Marcus said without thinking, then immediately turned red. "I mean, not that I'm comparing you to a plant. I mean not that I'm comparing my dating life to plant care. Oh God, I'm making this weird, aren't I?" The stranger laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made Marcus want to say funny things for the rest of his life, just to hear it again. "I'm Jamie," he said, extending his hand. "And don't worry, I've heard much weirder plant-related pickup lines." "That wasn't a pickup line," Marcus protested, shaking Jamie's hand and trying not to think about how warm it was. "I mean, it wasn't intentionally a pickup line. If it were a pickup line, it would have been much more sophisticated. Something like, he paused, realizing he had absolutely no idea what a sophisticated plant-related pickup line would sound like. "Something like, are you a rare orchid? Because I'd travel to the ends of the earth just to see you bloom," Jamie suggested with a grin. "That's terrible," Marcus said. "I know, I'm a botanist, not a poet." Jamie's grin widened. "Though I do know a lot about plants, and I can definitely help you save Fernando. You remember his name. It's a memorable name for a succulent, very dramatic." Jamie gestured to the fertilizer in Marcus's hands. "First rule of succulent care, put that down. You're basically offering to poison him." Marcus immediately set the bottle back on the shelf, as if it had personally offended him. "What else am I doing wrong?" "Well, how often do you water him?" "Every 2 days, just like the internet said." Jamie's expression suggested that Marcus had just admitted to some sort of horticultural war crime. "Every 2 days? Marcus, you're drowning the poor thing. Succulents want to be watered maybe once a week, possibly less." "But what if he gets thirsty?" "He's a plant, not a golden retriever." Marcus felt his entire worldview shifting. So you're telling me that the secret to keeping plants alive is ignoring them. The secret to keeping plants alive is understanding what they need, not what you think they need, Jamie said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who had clearly given this lecture before. Fernando here is a desert plant. In the wild, he might get water once a month if he's lucky. You're treating him like he's from the rainforest. I've been a helicopter plant parent, Marcus said, horrified. The most dangerous kind. Jamie picked up a small bag of special succulent soil. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to repot Fernando in proper soil, put him in a spot with bright indirect light, and then you're going to practice the most difficult skill known to plant parents. Benign neglect. What if I mess it up again? Then you call me, Jamie said, pulling out his phone. I'm like plant emergency services, but with better hair. Marcus looked at Jamie's completely untamed curls. That's not a high bar. Hey, Jamie ran a hand through his hair, making it even more chaotic. I'll have you know this is a carefully cultivated look. It takes years of avoiding hairbrushes to achieve this level of natural disaster. It's working for you, Marcus said, then immediately wanted to crawl under the nearest display of garden gnomes. I know what you mean, Jamie said softly, and there was something in his voice that made Marcus's stomach do a little flip. So, are you going to give me your number, or do I have to follow you home to make sure you don't kill Fernando? That sounded much less creepy in your head, didn't it? So much less creepy. Marcus laughed and pulled out his phone. Okay, but I'm warning you. I'm the kind of person who sends updates about my plants like they're my children. I'm a botanist who talks to his houseplants, Jamie said, entering his number into Marcus's phone. I think we'll get along just fine. Chapter 2, The Emergency Call or Fernando's Near-Death Experience. 3 days later, Marcus was staring at Fernando with the kind of panic usually reserved for natural disasters or unexpected visits from his mother. Despite following Jamie's instructions to the letter, repotting, relocating, and practicing benign neglect, Fernando had somehow managed to look even worse. What had started as a yellowing succulent was now a yellowing succulent with what appeared to be suspicious white spots. Marcus did what any rational adult would do in this situation. He called Jamie at 11 p.m. in a state of complete panic. He's dying, Marcus said the moment Jamie picked up, skipping right past normal greeting protocols. I followed your instructions exactly, and he's dying. I think the white spots might be some kind of plant leprosy. Okay, first of all, plants don't get leprosy. Jamie's voice came through the phone, tinged with amusement and what sounded like stifled laughter. Second, slow down. What white spots? Fuzzy white spots. They're spreading. Jamie, I think I've created some kind of botanical plague. What if it's contagious? What if it spreads to other plants? What if... Marcus, breathe, Jamie interrupted gently. It sounds like mealybugs. They're annoying but not fatal and definitely not contagious to humans. Are you free tomorrow evening? I can come over and take a look. You'd do that? I'm not letting Fernando die on my watch, Jamie said seriously. Plus, I'm curious to see what your place looks like. I'm betting you have everything organized by color, including your books. Marcus looked around his apartment, taking in his color-coordinated bookshelf, his alphabetically arranged spice rack, and his carefully sorted mail pile. That's a very specific assumption. Am I wronged? No. I knew it. What's your address? Chapter 3, The House Call or How to Impress a Botanist. Marcus spent the next day engaging in what could only be described as apartment panic cleaning, which involved reorganizing things that were already organized and somehow managing to make his place look simultaneously spotless and like he was trying too hard. He kept telling himself this was about Fernando's health, not about impressing Jamie, but the new throw pillows he'd bought suggested otherwise. Jamie arrived at exactly 7 p.m., carrying what appeared to be a small medical bag for plants and looking unfairly attractive in worn jeans and a t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right," with a small cactus illustration. Nice shirt, Marcus said, opening the door. Thanks. It's my professional consultation attire, Jamie replied, stepping into the apartment and immediately looking around with a kind of appreciation that made Marcus's heart skip. Wow, this place is incredibly organized. It's like Pinterest had a baby with the container store. Is that good or bad? It's very you, Jamie said, which somehow felt like the best compliment Marcus had ever received. Now, where's the patient? Fernando sat on the windowsill looking pitiful, his white spots even more pronounced in the evening light. Jamie approached him with the serious demeanor of a doctor making rounds, pulling a magnifying glass from his plant bag and examining the succulent closely. "Definitely mealybugs," Jamie announced after his examination. "The good news is that Fernando isn't dying. The bad news is that he's basically got plant lice." "That's disgusting." "It's nature," Jamie said cheerfully, pulling out what looked like a small spray bottle. "The treatment is pretty simple. We'll spray him with this. It's basically plant-safe soap, and then you'll need to keep an eye on him for the next few weeks." "What if I mess it up again?" Jamie looked at him seriously. "Marcus, can I ask you something? Why are you so worried about keeping this plant alive?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. It was a fair question, and the answer was more complicated than he'd expected. "My sister gave him to me when I moved into this place. She said every home needs something living in it besides the person who lives there, and I've managed to kill every plant I've ever owned. I want to be the kind of person who can keep something alive, you know." "You are that kind of person," Jamie said softly. "You called me at 11 p.m. because you were worried about Fernando. You've been checking on him every day. You reorganized your entire windowsill to make sure he had the right light. That's not the behavior of someone who can't keep things alive. That's the behavior of someone who cares maybe a little too much." "Is that bad?" "It's not bad. It's just intense," Jamie smiled. "Some plants need intense care, others need space. The trick is figuring out which is which." "Are we still talking about plants?" Jamie's smile turned a little shy. "Maybe not entirely." They spent the next hour treating Fernando and talking about everything from Marcus's job as a graphic designer to Jamie's research on endangered plant species. Marcus learned that Jamie had gotten into botany because he'd grown up in his grandmother's garden, that he had strong opinions about the proper way to propagate succulents, and that he made the most extraordinary facial expressions when he was passionate about something. "So what's the most interesting plant you've ever worked with?" Marcus asked as they finished treating Fernando. Jamie's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's easy. There's this incredibly rare orchid called Paphioptilum wardii. There are maybe 50 left in the wild, and I've been working on a conservation project to try to save them. They're absolutely beautiful, but they're so specific about their growing conditions that they're nearly impossible to cultivate outside their natural habitat." "Where are they found?" "The mountains of Myanmar. But there's actually a small population that was brought to a private greenhouse about an hour from here for research purposes." Jamie's expression shifted to something Marcus couldn't quite read. "The problem is that the greenhouse owner is more interested in their monetary value than their conservation value." "What do you mean?" "He's planning to sell them to private collectors instead of donating them to proper conservation programs. These orchids could be the key to saving the species, but instead they're going to end up in some rich person's private collection where they'll probably die anyway." Marcus could see the frustration in Jamie's face, the way his hands moved as he talked about something that clearly mattered deeply to him. "That's awful. Isn't there anything you can do?" "Not legally," Jamie said, then looked at Marcus with an expression that was part mischief, part determination. "But I've been thinking about other options." "What kind of other options?" "The kind that might require a second person and a willingness to engage in morally justified but technically illegal activities." Marcus stared at him. "Are you asking me to help you steal orchids?" "I'm asking if you'd be interested in helping me relocate endangered plants to a proper conservation facility where they can be used to save their species, instead of sitting in some collector's private greenhouse gathering dust." "That's definitely stealing orchids. It's conservation with extra steps." Marcus looked at Fernando, sitting peacefully in his newly treated state, then back at Jamie, who was watching him with hopeful eyes and an expression that suggested he was already planning their criminal enterprise. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Marcus said slowly, "but tell me more." Chapter 4, The Plan, or How to Become a Botanical Criminal. Jamie's plan, as it turned out, was both surprisingly detailed and absolutely insane. He'd been researching the greenhouse's security system for weeks, had blueprints of the building, legally obtained, he insisted, and had even done reconnaissance drives to figure out the best approach route. "You've really thought this through," Marcus said, looking at the hand-drawn map spread across his coffee table. They'd ordered Chinese takeout and turned Fernando's treatment into a full-scale heist planning session, which was not how Marcus had expected his evening to go. "I'm a scientist," Jamie said around a mouthful of lo mein. "I approach everything methodically, including morally questionable plant liberation." "You keep calling it plant liberation because plant theft sounds so harsh." Marcus studied the greenhouse layout. Okay, so you're telling me that the security system is basically just cameras and motion sensors. No guards. Right, the owner is cheap. He figures no one's going to break into steal plants. Jamie grinned. He's about to learn how wrong he is. And you're sure these orchids are actually endangered? Critically endangered. There's a whole conservation program waiting for them at the University Botanical Garden. They just need someone to, facilitate the transfer. Facilitate the transfer, Marcus repeated. That's a nice way to put it. I'm good with euphemisms. Marcus looked at Jamie, who was enthusiastically pointing out security blind spots with a chopstick, his hair even more chaotic than usual, and his eyes bright with excitement. There was something infectious about his passion, the way he talked about these plants like they were living beings that deserved protection rather than just objects to be bought and sold. I have a confession, Marcus said. You're secretly a undercover cop. Worse, I've never broken a law in my life. I returned a pen to the bank once because I accidentally walked out with it. Jamie paused mid-chopstick gesture. That's actually kind of adorable. I'm serious, I don't even jaywell. What if we get caught? What if I'm terrible at this? What if? Marcus, Jamie interrupted gently. We don't have to do this. I can figure out another way. No, Marcus said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. I want to help. These plants deserve better than being someone's trophy collection. I need you to be patient with me. I'm going to be the most nervous plant thief in history. I prefer botanical liberation specialist. I'm going to be the most nervous botanical liberation specialist in history. Jamie reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. We'll start with something simple. Just getting in and out with one small orchid, see how it goes. If you're not comfortable, we abort mission and order more Chinese food. That's your backup plan. Chinese food. It's gotten me through most of life's difficulties. Marcus looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Jamie's face. When do we do this? Tomorrow night. The owner travels on weekends, so the place will be empty except for the automated systems. Tomorrow night, Marcus repeated, his stomach doing somersaults. Okay, but I'm going to need very detailed instructions. Like very detailed. I'm talking step by step, color-coded if possible. I can work with that, Jamie said, grinning. I love a man who appreciates good organization. Are we really doing this? We're really doing this. Marcus squeezed Jamie's hand back. I can't believe I'm about to become a criminal for someone I met 3 days ago in the succulent section. It's a very romantic origin story. It's completely insane. The best love stories usually are. Marcus's brain caught on one word and promptly forgot how to function. Love story. Jamie's face went red. I mean, hypothetically speaking, if this were a story about two people who met over plants and then committed crimes together, that would be, I didn't mean. Jamie. Yeah. Are you asking me out? I'm asking you to help me steal orchids. But if you want to consider it a date, I'm not opposed to that interpretation. Marcus laughed. This is definitely the weirdest date I've ever been on. We haven't even gotten to the actual crime yet. Good point. Marcus looked at the maps again, then back at Jamie. So what do I need to know about cat burglary? First lesson, it's only cat burglary if you're stealing cats. What do you call it when you're stealing plants? Extremely niche activism with romantic undertones. I'm never going to survive this, Marcus said, but he was smiling. Sure you will, Jamie said confidently. Besides, Fernando's already looking better. You're clearly good at plant rescue operations. Marcus looked over at Fernando, who did indeed seem perkier after his treatment. You really think this will work? I think, Jamie said, that tomorrow night is going to be the beginning of something amazing. The beginning of our criminal careers. The beginning of us. Chapter 5, The Heist or Breaking and Entering for Beginners. Marcus had expected to spend the day before their botanical liberation mission in a state of nervous excitement. Instead, he found himself surprisingly calm, methodically preparing for what was either going to be the most romantic night of his life or the most expensive mistake he'd ever made. He'd gone shopping for heist clothes, which according to Jamie meant dark colors and comfortable shoes, but which Marcus had somehow interpreted as an entire new wardrobe of black clothing that makes me look like a very well-dressed cat burglar. He'd also researched lockpicking techniques on YouTube, practiced moving quietly around his apartment, and organized a first aid kit that was probably overkill for a plant theft, but made him feel more prepared. Jamie arrived at 1 a.m., dressed in dark jeans and a black hoodie, carrying a backpack that presumably contained their plant liberation supplies. He took one look at Marcus's all-black ensemble and grinned. "You look like you're about to star in a heist movie," he said. "Is that good or bad?" "It's perfect, very professional." Jamie's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though you might be slightly overdressed for greenhouse breaking and entering. I wanted to look the part. Mission accomplished. Ready to go." Marcus took a deep breath, looked around his perfectly organized apartment, and nodded. "Let's go save some orchids." The drive to the greenhouse took about 40 minutes, during which Jamie ran through the plan 3 more times, and Marcus tried not to think about what his mother would say if she found out her son had been arrested for plant theft. The facility was located in a somewhat industrial area, surrounded by other agricultural businesses, and blessed with the kind of ambient darkness that suggested the universe was cooperating with their criminal enterprise. "Okay," Jamie said as they parked a block away from the greenhouse. "Remember, we go in through the back, avoid the main camera angles, find the orchid section, grab one specimen, and get out. Total time inside should be less than 15 minutes. What if something goes wrong? Then we run very fast and pretend this never happened. That's your contingency plan. It's worked for me so far." Marcus looked at the greenhouse in the distance, a long, low building with glass walls that reflected the moonlight like something out of a Gothic novel. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. Having second thoughts, third and fourth thoughts, but I'm still in." Jamie leaned over and kissed him, quick and soft and tasting like the mint gum he'd been chewing nervously during the drive. "For luck," he said when they broke apart. "That's not fair," Marcus said, his brain temporarily short-circuiting. "What's not fair? You can't kiss me right before we commit a felony. Now I'm going to be thinking about that instead of focusing on not getting arrested." "Good," Jamie said with a grin. "Distracted Marcus is probably less likely to panic." "I hate that you're right." They made their way to the back of the greenhouse, moving quietly through the shadows and trying to look like they belonged there, which was challenging since they obviously didn't. Jamie had been right about the security system. It was clearly designed to deter casual vandalism rather than serious plant theft. The cameras were visible and easy to avoid, and the motion sensors seemed to be focused on the main entrances. "This is it," Jamie whispered as they reached a small service door. He pulled out his surprisingly professional lock-picking kit and got to work. "Where did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked, impressed despite himself. "YouTube. Same place I learned plant propagation and how to make sourdough starter. You live an interesting life." "It's about to get more interesting." The lock clicked open, and Jamie grinned triumphantly. "We're in." The inside of the greenhouse was warm and humid, filled with the green smell of growing things and the soft sound of automated irrigation systems. Jamie led the way with a small flashlight, navigating between rows of plants with the confidence of someone who had clearly done his research. "There," he whispered, pointing to a section near the back of the building. "That's where they keep the rare specimens." The orchid section was breathtaking. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see dozens of exotic flowers in every color imaginable, their petals delicate and impossibly intricate. Jamie moved between them like he was in church, his face soft with wonder. "They're beautiful," Marcus whispered. "They're perfect," Jamie replied, stopping in front of a small plant with pale pink and white flowers. "This is it. Paphioptilum wardii, one of the last of its kind." He carefully lifted the pot, checking the plant for any signs of damage. "She's healthy," he said softly. "She's going to do so much better in the conservation program." "All the best plants are female," Jamie said with a grin. "It's a scientific fact." "That's not a scientific fact. It's a Jamie fact, which is almost the same thing." Marcus was about to respond when they heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the parking lot outside. "That's not supposed to happen," Jamie said, his face going pale. "What do we do?" "We stick to the plan, out the back, quick and quiet." But as they made their way toward the exit, they heard voices coming from the front of the building. Male voices discussing something about checking the irrigation system. "Weekend maintenance," Jamie whispered. "It's not on the schedule." New plan, we wait until they leave." They crouched behind a row of large tropical plants, the orchid cradled carefully in Jamie's arms, listening to the voices move through the greenhouse. Marcus's heart was beating so loudly he was sure the maintenance workers would hear it from across the building. "This is insane," he whispered. "This is an adventure," Jamie corrected softly. "We're going to get arrested. We're going to save an endangered species." "Same thing in this case." Jamie looked at him in the dim light, his face serious. "Marcus, I need you to know something. This isn't just about the orchid. What do you mean? I mean, I've been thinking about this conservation thing for months, but I never actually planned to do anything about it until I met you. Why? Because you make me want to be braver. You make me want to do things that matter, even if they're scary. Marcus stared at him. You're having an emotional revelation while we're hiding from security in a greenhouse. I'm having an emotional revelation because we're hiding from security in a greenhouse. There's something about potential imprisonment that makes you want to be honest about your feelings. We're not going to prison, but if we were, I'd want you to know that I'm falling for you. Hard. And not just because you agreed to help me with this completely illegal plant rescue operation. When you put it like that, it sounds kind of romantic, Marcus said, then paused. Did you just say you're falling for me? I did. Is that okay? Marcus looked at Jamie, holding an endangered orchid in the middle of a greenhouse they'd just broken into. His hair a disaster and his eyes bright with mischief and sincerity, and realized that he'd never been more sure of anything in his life. It's more than okay, he said softly, because I'm falling for you too, even though I got you into this mess. Especially because you got me into this mess. They might have kissed again, but the voices were getting closer. Jamie motioned toward a different exit, one that led to the side of the building rather than the back. They made their way carefully through the plants, moving as quietly as possible with their precious cargo. Almost there, Jamie whispered as they reached the door. This is either going to be the best story we ever tell or the worst decision we ever made, Marcus said. Why not both? Jamie worked his magic on the lock, and they slipped out into the night, the orchid safe in its pot and their hearts beating in sync. They made it back to the car without incident, both of them slightly giddy with adrenaline and the realization that they'd actually pulled it off. We did it, Jamie said as they drove away, the orchid secured carefully in the backseat. We're criminals now, Marcus said, but he was smiling. We're conservationists with questionable methods. I can't believe that worked. I can't believe you agreed to do it. Marcus looked over at Jamie, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. So what happens now? Do we deliver the orchid to the university? First thing tomorrow morning, they're expecting it. Jamie paused. Well, they're expecting an anonymous donation of a rare orchid. They don't know where it's coming from. And after that, we go back to your place, make sure Fernando is still alive, and figure out what we want to do with the rest of our lives. Our lives? Well, my life, your life. Our lives together, if you're interested. Marcus considered this. He'd known Jamie for exactly 4 days, and in that time he'd learned plant care, committed a felony, and fallen completely head over heels for a man who talked to his houseplants, and thought that grand theft flora was a reasonable second-date activity. I'm interested, he said. Good, Jamie said, reaching over to squeeze his hand, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Chapter 6, The Morning After, or How to Explain Plant Theft to Your Sister. Marcus woke up the next morning with the kind of disorientation that comes from either drinking too much or committing your first felony. Since he'd had exactly 1 beer the night before, it was definitely the felony. Jamie was already awake, sitting at Marcus's kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the rescued orchid, which was looking remarkably perky for a plant that had been through a criminal adventure. Fernando sat nearby, apparently keeping the orchid company in the way that plants do. Good morning, criminal, Jamie said with a grin as Marcus stumbled into the kitchen. Don't call me that, Marcus said, though he was smiling. What if someone hears you? Your plants aren't going to turn you in. You don't know that? Fernando's been acting suspicious lately. Jamie laughed and pulled Marcus down for a kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility. Sleep well. Eventually, I kept having dreams about being chased by angry botanists. That's oddly specific. My subconscious is very literal. Marcus looked at the orchid. How's she doing? Perfect. Ready for her new home at the university. I'm going to drive her over in an hour. Can I come with you? I was hoping you'd ask. They were interrupted by Marcus's phone ringing. He looked at the caller ID and groaned. My sister, he explained to Jamie. She has a sixth sense about when I'm doing something she needs to worry about. Answer it, Jamie said. Act natural. I don't know how to act natural anymore. I'm a plant criminal now. You're a plant liberation specialist. Marcus answered the phone. Hi, Elena. You sound weird, his sister said immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Why would something be wrong? Because you sound like you're hiding something. Are you hiding something? Marcus looked at Jamie, who was trying not to laugh. I'm not hiding anything. Marcus James Chen, I've known you for 28 years. You're hiding something. Did you kill Fernando? Fernando's fine. He's right here looking very healthy, actually. Then what? Elena paused. Oh my God, you met someone. I didn't, how did you? You have that voice you get when you're trying not to sound excited about something. Who is he? Where did you meet him? Have you had sex yet? Elena, I'm your sister. I'm allowed to ask invasive personal questions. It's in the sister contract. Jamie was now openly grinning, clearly enjoying Marcus's discomfort. Marcus made a face at him. His name is Jamie, Marcus said, giving up on denial. We met at the garden center, and no, we haven't. That's none of your business. You met at a garden center. That's so perfectly you. What does he do? He's a botanist. Of course he is. What else? Marcus looked at Jamie, who was now holding the stolen orchid and making exaggerated, innocent faces. He's passionate about plant conservation. That's sweet. When do I get to meet him? Soon, Marcus said. Maybe after things settle down a bit. Settle down from what? From new relationship excitement. You're being weird again. I'm always weird. You're used to it. This is a different kind of weird, but fine, I'll let it go for now. Just promise me you're being safe. I'm being very safe, Marcus said, which was technically true if you ignored the breaking and entering part. Good, I love you, little brother. Love you too. Marcus hung up and looked at Jamie. She knows something's up. She sounds like a good sister. She is. She's also extremely persistent when she thinks I'm hiding something from her. Are you going to tell her about last night? Marcus considered this. Eventually, maybe after the statute of limitations runs out. It's plant theft, not murder. I think you're safe. Says the man who's about to deliver stolen goods to a university. Anonymous donation, Jamie corrected. Very different legal classification. An hour later, they were standing in the parking lot of the university botanical garden, watching Jamie hand over the orchid to a professor who was practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible, the professor was saying, examining the orchid carefully. We've been trying to get specimens for the conservation program for years. Where did you say this came from? Anonymous donor, Jamie said smoothly. Someone who wanted to remain unnamed, but supports the conservation work you're doing here. Well, please pass along our gratitude to your anonymous donor. This could be the key to saving the species. Marcus felt a warm glow of satisfaction watching the professor's excitement. Maybe they were criminals, but they were criminals with a good cause. We should do this more often, he said as they walked back to the car. What? Donate orchids to universities? Break the law for the greater good. Jamie stopped walking and stared at him. Who are you, and what did you do with the man who returns pens to banks? I think you're a bad influence on me. I think you're finally discovering your rebellious side. I think, Marcus said, pulling Jamie closer, that I'm falling in love with you. Think. No. I know I'm falling in love with you. Jamie's smile was bright enough to power the entire botanical garden. Good, because I'm already there. They kissed in the parking lot of the university, surrounded by the kind of carefully cultivated plants that would never need to be rescued from private collectors. And Marcus thought that maybe the best love stories really did start with a little bit of crime. Chapter 7, The Complications, or When Plant Theft Gets Personal. 3 weeks later, Marcus had settled into what he was starting to think of as his new normal. A life that included daily plant care consultations, via text, regular visits from a botanist who had somehow taken over half his windowsill space, and a growing collection of rescued plants that Jamie kept bringing over. This is getting out of hand, Marcus said, looking around his apartment, which now resembled a small greenhouse. I went from having one dying succulent to running what appears to be a plant sanctuary. They're not all rescued, Jamie protested from his spot on the couch, where he was repotting what he claimed was a temporarily displaced bromeliad. Some of them I bought legally. Which ones? Jamie considered this. Fernando. You didn't buy Fernando. He was a gift from my sister. Okay, so maybe they're all rescued. But look how happy they are. Marcus had to admit that his apartment had never looked better. The plants added life and color to his carefully organized space, and there was something deeply satisfying about watching them thrive under Jamie's expert care and his own gradually improving plant parenting skills. I'm turning into one of those people, Marcus said. What people? Plant people. Next thing you know, I'll be talking to them and giving them names and... He paused, looking at a small fern Jamie had brought over the day before. I've already named the fern, haven't I? What did you call her? Francine. That's a good name for a fern. This is your fault, Marcus said, but he was smiling. 6 months ago, my biggest concern was whether my bookshelf was properly color-coordinated. Now I'm worried about the humidity levels in my apartment. Are you complaining? Marcus looked at Jamie, who was carefully tending to the bromeliad with the kind of attention most people reserved for newborn babies, his hair falling into his eyes and his hands gentle with the delicate roots. No, he said softly, I'm not complaining. Their peaceful plant tending was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Marcus and Jamie looked at each other. Expecting anyone? Jamie asked. No. You? No. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Marcus went to the door and looked through the peephole, then froze. It's the police, he whispered. Jamie went pale. What? 2 officers. They're in uniform. Okay, Jamie said, setting down the bromeliad with shaking hands. Okay, don't panic. Maybe it's about something else. Maybe someone's car got broken into or... The knock came a third time, followed by a voice. Police, we'd like to ask you some questions about a recent theft at Morrison's greenhouse. Marcus and Jamie stared at each other in horror. We're going to prison, Marcus whispered. We don't know that, Jamie whispered back, though his expression suggested he was thinking the same thing. Should we run? Where would we go? I don't know, Canada. Marcus breathed. Let me handle this. Jamie walked to the door and opened it with what Marcus had to admire was impressive composure, considering they were about to be arrested for plant theft. Good afternoon, officers, Jamie said politely. How can I help you? The 2 police officers were younger than Marcus had expected, and they looked about as thrilled to be investigating plant theft as Marcus would have expected anyone to be. I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Johnson, the first one said. We're investigating a break-in at Morrison's greenhouse 3 weeks ago. Are you Jamie Rodriguez? Yes. We'd like to ask you some questions. May we come in? Jamie glanced back at Marcus, who was trying to look innocent while surrounded by what was obviously a suspicious number of plants. Of course. The officers entered the apartment and immediately looked around at what Marcus realized was essentially a plant crime scene. Dozens of plants in various stages of growth, professional plant care equipment, and what was clearly more botanical expertise than any normal person should possess. Nice plants, Officer Johnson said, and Marcus couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. Thank you, Jamie replied. I'm a botanist. So we heard. Mr. Rodriguez, where were you on the night of April 15th? Marcus watched Jamie's face carefully compose itself into an expression of polite confusion. April 15th, I'd have to check my calendar. Why? That's when someone broke into Morrison's greenhouse and stole a rare orchid worth approximately $15,000. Marcus nearly choked. $15,000. He'd helped steal a $15,000 plant. He was definitely going to prison. That's terrible, Jamie said, his voice perfectly level. Plant theft is a serious crime. Yes, it is, Officer Martinez agreed. The owner says the thief knew exactly what they were looking for. Someone with botanical expertise. Someone who would know the value of rare orchids. There are a lot of botanists in the area, Jamie said carefully. True, but not many who have been publicly vocal about their disagreement with Mr. Morrison's business practices. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Of course, Jamie had been publicly vocal about it. Of course, there was a paper trail. I've expressed concerns about conservation ethics, Jamie said. That's not unusual in my field. Mr. Rodriguez, Officer Johnson said, do you own any rare orchids? No, Jamie said, which was technically true since they donated the orchid to the university. Have you acquired any new plants recently? Jamie gestured around the apartment. I acquire new plants frequently. It's part of my work. Any orchids? A few common varieties. Nothing rare or expensive. Officer Martinez was taking notes, and Marcus was trying not to hyperventilate. What about you, Mr. Chen? Marcus managed. Marcus Chen. Mr. Chen, do you know anything about rare orchids? Nothing, Marcus said, which was completely true. I can barely keep a succulent alive. Both officers looked at Fernando, who was sitting on the windowsill looking remarkably healthy and well cared for. That's a nice succulent, Officer Johnson observed. Jamie's been helping me with plant care, Marcus said quickly. I see. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. Well, gentlemen, we may have more questions later. If you think of anything that might help with our investigation, please call. He handed Jamie a business card. Of course, Jamie said. I hope you catch whoever did it. After the officers left, Marcus and Jamie sat in silence for several minutes, staring at each other across the room full of plants that suddenly felt like evidence. $15,000, Marcus finally said. I know. We stole a $15,000 plant. We liberated a $15,000 plant. Jamie, this is serious. They obviously suspect you. What if they come back with a warrant? What if... Marcus, Jamie interrupted gently, look at me. Marcus looked at him. We did the right thing, Jamie said firmly. That orchid is safe now. It's being used for conservation research instead of sitting in some collector's private greenhouse. Yes, it was worth a lot of money, but its real value is in what it can contribute to saving its species. That's not going to matter if we get arrested. We're not going to get arrested. They don't have any proof, and they can't get any proof because we were careful. Were we careful? Because I feel like we weren't that careful. Jamie stood up and crossed the room to sit beside Marcus on the couch. We were careful enough. And even if we weren't, I don't regret it. You don't regret potentially going to prison. I don't regret saving that orchid, and I definitely don't regret meeting you. Marcus looked at him, this beautiful, passionate, completely insane man who had somehow convinced him to become a plant thief, and then made him fall in love in the process. You're going to be the death of me. I prefer to think I'm going to be the life of you. That doesn't even make sense. It makes perfect sense. Before you met me, you were worried about keeping one succulent alive. Look around. Jamie gestured to the thriving plants throughout the apartment. You're not just keeping them alive, you're helping them flourish. Marcus followed his gaze, taking in the green abundance that had somehow taken over his previously sterile space. Francine the fern was unfurling new fronds, the bromeliad was producing a spectacular flower spike, and Fernando was looking better than he ever had. When you put it like that, Marcus said slowly, it does sound kind of romantic. Everything sounds romantic when you're in love. Are we in love? I am, Jamie said simply. Are you? Marcus considered this question, though the answer had been obvious for weeks. He was in love with Jamie's passion for plants, his willingness to break rules for the greater good, his terrible plant-related pickup lines, and the way he made everything in Marcus's carefully ordered life feel suddenly full of possibility. Yeah, he said, I am. Good, Jamie said, kissing him softly. Because we're probably going to need each other if we're going to survive being criminals. We're not criminals, Marcus protested automatically. We're conservation activists with flexible ethics. I hate that I'm starting to like that description. You're embracing your rebellious side. I don't have a rebellious side. Jamie looked around the apartment full of illegally acquired plants. Evidence suggests otherwise. Chapter 8, the investigation continues, or how to act innocent when you're guilty. The police didn't come back for 2 weeks, which gave Marcus just enough time to convince himself that maybe they were in the clear before Officer Martinez showed up at his office. Marcus worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, spending his days creating logos and brochures, and trying to make other people's businesses look more appealing than they actually were. It was steady work that paid well enough to afford his color-coordinated lifestyle, and it had the significant advantage of being completely legal. Mr. Chen? Officer Martinez appeared at his cubicle like a uniformed specter of his criminal past. Could I speak with you for a moment? Every head in the office turned to stare at Marcus, who could feel his face turning red. Of course, he managed. Is there somewhere we could talk privately? They ended up in one of the small conference rooms, where Officer Martinez pulled out his notebook with the kind of professional efficiency that made Marcus want to confess to every minor crime he'd ever committed, including that time in 3rd grade when he'd kept a library book for an extra week. Mr. Chen, I want to ask you about your relationship with Jamie Rodriguez. What about it? How long have you known him? Marcus calculated quickly. About 2 months. And how did you meet? At a garden center. He was helping me with plant care advice. Which garden center? Morrison's Home and Garden Center. Officer Martinez made a note. The same Morrison's that owns the greenhouse that was robbed. Marcus's stomach dropped. He hadn't even thought about that connection. Yes, but that's just a coincidence. It's the closest garden center to my apartment. Mr. Chen, has Mr. Rodriguez ever discussed his views on plant conservation with you? He's passionate about protecting endangered species, Marcus said carefully. It's his job. Has he ever expressed frustration with private collectors who purchase rare plants? Marcus hesitated. The honest answer was yes. Jamie had expressed frustration about that exact thing, repeatedly and with considerable detail. But admitting that felt like throwing Jamie under a bus filled with criminal charges. He's mentioned that he thinks rare plants belong in conservation programs rather than private collections, Marcus said finally. I think most conservationists feel that way. Has he ever suggested taking direct action to address this problem? What do you mean by direct action? Has he ever suggested removing plants from private collections without permission? Marcus looked Officer Martinez directly in the eye. No, he lied. Officer Martinez studied him for a moment. Mr. Chen, I have to ask, have you and Mr. Rodriguez acquired any new plants recently? Jamie brings me plants sometimes. He's helping me learn plant care. What kinds of plants? Common house plants, nothing expensive or rare. Would you be willing to let us examine these plants? Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Most of their plants were legitimately acquired, but there were definitely a few that had been rescued from various situations that probably wouldn't stand up to close scrutiny. Do you have a warrant? He asked. No, but we could get one if necessary. Then I think I'd prefer to wait for a warrant, Marcus said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. Officer Martinez made another note. That's your right, of course. Though I have to say, innocent people usually don't mind cooperating with police investigations. I'm happy to cooperate, Marcus said. I just want to make sure we're following proper legal procedures. Of course. Officer Martinez closed his notebook and stood up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chen. We'll be in touch. After he left, Marcus sat in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then he pulled out his phone and called Jamie. They came to my office, he said as soon as Jamie answered. Who came to your office? The police, Officer Martinez. He asked about our plants, Jamie. He wanted to examine them. What did you tell him? I told him no warrant, no search. But Jamie, they're getting close. They know we met at Morrison's. They know you have strong opinions about plant conservation. It's only a matter of time before they put it together. Okay, Jamie said, and Marcus could hear him thinking. Okay, we need to be smart about this. Are you at work? Yes. Can you leave early? Probably. Why? Meet me at my place. We need to talk. Jamie's apartment was the polar opposite of Marcus's organized space. A cheerful chaos of plants, books, research papers, and what appeared to be several ongoing botanical experiments. Marcus had been there dozens of times over the past 2 months, but it still amazed him how someone could live in such beautiful disorder. Okay, Jamie said as soon as Marcus arrived. Here's what I think is happening. Morrison reported the theft to his insurance company, and they're pushing the police to solve it because $15,000 is enough money to make everyone take it seriously. That's not making me feel better. The good news is that they still don't have any actual evidence. Everything they have is circumstantial. Jamie, they know you have strong opinions about private collectors. They know we met at Morrison's Garden Center. They know you're a botanist with the expertise to identify valuable orchids. That's not circumstantial. That's a pretty clear motive and opportunity. But they can't prove we were there that night. Can't they? What if there were cameras we didn't see? What if someone saw us? What if... Marcus, Jamie interrupted, pulling him close. You're spiraling. I'm realistically assessing our chances of not going to prison. We're not going to prison. You keep saying that, but... Jamie kissed him, effectively stopping his panic spiral. We're not going to prison because we were careful, and because we didn't leave any evidence, and because even if they suspect us, suspicion isn't proof. What if they get a warrant to search our apartments? Then they'll find a lot of very healthy, very legal houseplants. What about the ones that aren't legal? What ones that aren't legal? Jamie asked with exaggerated innocence. Marcus stared at him. Are you telling me that all those rescued plants you've been bringing over were actually purchased legally? I'm telling you that if anyone asks, all the plants in both of our apartments were acquired through legitimate means, and we have receipts to prove it. Do we actually have receipts? We have receipts. Jamie, did you actually buy all those plants? I bought some of them. The others? Well, let's just say I have friends in the botanical community who are very supportive of conservation efforts. Marcus sat down heavily on Jamie's couch. So you're telling me that not only did we steal a $15,000 orchid, but you've been running some kind of plant rescue operation without telling me. I prefer to think of it as a conservation network. How many plants are we talking about? Define we. Jamie. Maybe a dozen over the past few years. All from situations where they were being neglected or were about to be destroyed. Nothing like the orchid situation. Marcus put his head in his hands. I'm in love with a botanical criminal mastermind. You make it sound so dramatic. It is dramatic. This is my life now, police investigations and plant theft, and Marcus paused. Wait, did you say you loved me? When? Just now, you said I was in love with you, past tense, like it was an established fact. Jamie's face went red. I might have said that. Do you love me back? I might. That's not an answer. Jamie sat down beside him on the couch. Yes, I love you back. I love that you're worried about going to prison, but you're still here. I love that you've turned your apartment into a plant sanctuary. I love that you named your fern Francine. I love that you're the kind of person who returns pens to banks, but will also commit felony plant theft for conservation. You love that I'm a criminal. I love that you're the kind of person who will break rules when it matters. Marcus looked at Jamie, sitting in his chaotic apartment surrounded by plants that may or may not have been legally acquired, declaring his love in the middle of a police investigation. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it was somehow the most romantic moment of Marcus's life. I love you too, he said, even though you're probably going to get us both arrested. I'm not going to get us arrested. Promise. I promise. Good, because I've gotten used to having you around. It would be inconvenient if you went to prison. Just inconvenient. Devastating, it would be devastating. Jamie kissed him again, soft and sweet and tasting like the future Marcus was just beginning to imagine. It's not going to come to that. How can you be so sure? Because, Jamie said with a grin, I have a plan. Chapter 9, The Plan, or How to Clear Your Name When You're Guilty. Jamie's plan, as it turned out, was both brilliant and completely insane, which Marcus was beginning to recognize as Jamie's signature style. You want to do what? Marcus asked, staring at Jamie like he'd suggested they rob a bank next. I want to prove that we couldn't have stolen the orchid, Jamie repeated patiently. But we did steal the orchid. Right, but we need to prove that we didn't. Jamie, that's not how proof works. It is if we do it right. They were sitting in Jamie's living room with what appeared to be a conspiracy board spread across the coffee table. Photos of Morrison's greenhouse, copies of the police reports that Jamie had somehow obtained, and a timeline of events that looked like it belonged in a detective show. Explain this to me again, Marcus said, because I'm pretty sure you're suggesting we solve our own crime. I'm suggesting we provide the police with alternative suspects. That's not better. It's much better. Look, Jamie pointed to a photo of the greenhouse. The security system has been upgraded since our visit. New cameras, better locks, motion sensors. Morrison is clearly worried about more thefts. Good for him. But here's the thing. The insurance investigation turned up some interesting information about Morrison's business practices. Apparently, he's been importing rare plants without proper permits. Some of them might not be entirely legal. Marcus felt a headache forming. Please tell me you're not suggesting we blackmail him. I'm not suggesting blackmail. I'm suggesting we provide information to the appropriate authorities about potential violations of international conservation laws. That's still not going to help us with the theft charges. It might if it turns out that Morrison has been lying about the value of his plants for insurance purposes. Marcus stared at the conspiracy board, trying to follow Jamie's logic. You think he inflated the value of the orchid? I think Morrison is running a sketchy operation, and if we dig deep enough, we might find evidence that makes him look less sympathetic to the police and the insurance company. Jamie, this is insane. This is strategic. This is us committing more crimes to cover up the crimes we've already committed. This is us researching publicly available information about import permits and business licenses. Marcus looked at Jamie, who was clearly excited about his detective work. Where did you get all this information? I have friends in the botanical community. Word gets around about dealers who cut corners. Botanical community friends who are willing to help with criminal investigations. Botanical community friends who are concerned about conservation ethics and properly documented plant imports. Marcus picked up one of the documents from the coffee table. It appeared to be a shipping manifest with several questionable entries. Is this legal? It's a public record. Import documents are filed with customs. But how did you get it? I asked for it. You can just ask for customs documents. You can request them through the Freedom of Information Act. It takes a few weeks, but they have to provide them. Marcus stared at him. You filed a Freedom of Information Act request. I filed several Freedom of Information Act requests. When? Right after we liberated the orchid. I figured we might need backup documentation if things got complicated. Things are definitely complicated, which is why we need to be proactive. Marcus looked at the spread of documents, photos, and notes covering Jamie's coffee table. It was like looking at the work of a very organized, very botanical private investigator. Okay, he said slowly. Let's say your plan works. Let's say we find evidence that Morrison is running some kind of illegal import operation. What then? Then we provide that information to the authorities, and suddenly Morrison looks less like an innocent victim and more like someone with his own legal problems. And that helps us how? It gives the police other things to investigate. It raises questions about Morrison's credibility. It suggests that maybe the orchid theft was about more than just stealing an expensive plant. Marcus was quiet for a moment, trying to process the implications. You're suggesting we frame this as part of a larger investigation into illegal plant trafficking. I'm suggesting we provide context that makes our case more complicated for the prosecutors. Because complicated cases are harder to prove. Because complicated cases involve more variables, more potential suspects, and more reasonable doubt. Marcus had to admit that Jamie's logic was sound, even if his methods were questionable. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me organize all this information into a coherent timeline and cross-reference it with Morrison's business records. I can do that. I'm good at organizing information. I know you are, that's why you're perfect for this. They spent the next several hours going through documents, creating spreadsheets, and building what Marcus had to admit was a pretty compelling case that Morrison's business had some serious ethical and legal problems. By the time they finished, they had evidence of improperly documented imports, plants sold without proper permits, and what appeared to be significant discrepancies between Morrison's reported inventory and his actual stock. This is actually pretty damning, Marcus said, looking at their organized evidence. Morrison has been cutting corners for years. The orchid theft might just be the thing that brings his whole operation to light. So what do we do with all this? We send it to the appropriate authorities. Fish and Wildlife Service, Customs, the State Agriculture Department. We let them investigate Morrison while the police are investigating us, and hope that their investigation distracts from our investigation, and hope that their investigation reveals information that makes our case less clear-cut. Marcus looked at Jamie, who was smiling with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a particularly challenging puzzle. You know what the scary part is? What? This might actually work. Of course it'll work. I'm very good at research. You're very good at criminal conspiracy. I prefer strategic problem solving. I'm starting to think you have a euphemism for everything. It's one of my many talents. Marcus kissed him, quick and grateful, and still slightly amazed that this was his life now. I love your many talents, even the illegal ones. Especially the illegal ones. Especially the illegal ones, Marcus agreed and realized that he meant it completely. Chapter 10, The Resolution or How Love Conquers All, including the legal system. 3 months later, Marcus was watering Francine the fern and listening to Jamie talk to the bromeliad about proper humidity levels when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Officer Martinez and Marcus felt his stomach drop. It's the police, he told Jamie. Answer it, Jamie said calmly. Everything's going to be fine. Marcus wasn't sure he shared Jamie's confidence, but he answered the phone anyway. Hello, Officer Martinez. Mr. Chen, I wanted to call and let you know that we're closing the Morrison's greenhouse case. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. You're closing it. Yes. Our investigation revealed some complexities that made prosecution unlikely. I wanted to thank you and Mr. Rodriguez for your cooperation. Of course, Marcus managed. Can I ask what kind of complexities? Let's just say that Mr. Morrison's business practices came under scrutiny from several regulatory agencies, and the case became more complicated than a simple theft investigation. After Marcus hung up, he and Jamie sat in silence for several minutes, staring at each other across the apartment that had become their shared botanical sanctuary. We're not going to prison, Marcus said finally. We're not going to prison, Jamie confirmed. Morrison's in trouble instead. Morrison was already in trouble. We just helped bring it to light. I can't believe that worked. I told you I had a plan. Marcus looked around at their plants. Dozens of them now, creating a green oasis in the middle of the city. Some had been rescued, some had been purchased legally, and all of them were thriving under their careful attention. So what happens now? He asked. Now we continue our conservation work through proper legal channels. And our relationship continues through improper illegal channels. That doesn't make sense. I mean, we continue being criminals in love. We're not criminals anymore. We're reformed criminals in love. I like that better. Jamie stood up and walked over to the windowsill where Fernando sat. Looking healthier and happier, the than Marcus had ever seen him. You know what I realized during this whole investigation? What? I realized that the best conservation work happens when you have a partner. Someone who shares your values and supports your goals, even when they're scared. Even when those goals involve felony theft. Especially when those goals involve felony theft. Marcus joined Jamie at the windowsill, looking out at the city beyond their botanical paradise. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd break the law for plants. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd find love in the succulent section of a garden center. We're both full of surprises. We are. Jamie turned to face him, his expression suddenly serious. Marcus, I want to ask you something. Okay. Do you want to make this official? Make what official? Us, our partnership, our conservation work, all of it. Marcus felt his heart skip. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to be my partner in all things. Legal and illegal, botanical and personal. Jamie Rodriguez, are you proposing to me? I'm proposing that we combine our plant collections and see what happens. That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Really? Really? Also the most practical. Your place is bigger, and we're running out of room for plants here. So is that a yes? Marcus looked at Jamie, standing in the middle of their shared garden with his impossible hair and his passionate eyes, and his complete willingness to commit crimes for the greater good. He thought about Fernando, thriving on the windowsill after months of careful attention. He thought about the orchid they'd rescued, now contributing to conservation research at the university. He thought about all the other plants they'd saved and would continue to save, through legal means and otherwise. Yes, he said. It's a yes to all of it. Jamie's smile was bright enough to photosynthesize. Good, because I already started moving some of your plants to my place. You what? Just the ones that needed better light. Fernando's fine here, but Francine was looking a little pale. Marcus shook his head, laughing. I can't believe I'm going to spend the rest of my life with someone who steals my plants. I prefer relocates for optimal growing conditions. There you go with the euphemisms again. It's one of my most charming qualities. It's one of your many charming qualities. Jamie kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while Fernando watched from the windowsill and Francine rustled approvingly from her new spot by the bathroom window, where the light was indeed much better. Epilogue 1 year later. Marcus Chen had never imagined that his life would include regular visits to botanical gardens, a working knowledge of plant propagation techniques, and a boyfriend who talked to houseplants like they were beloved pets. He'd also never imagined that he'd be standing in front of a room full of conservationists, giving a presentation about ethical plant rescue operations. The key to successful plant conservation, he was saying to the assembled group, is building partnerships between community members and professional botanists. When people work together toward a common goal, amazing things can happen. In the audience, Jamie beamed with pride, occasionally whispering comments to the plants they'd brought with them. Fernando and Francine, who had become something of local celebrities in the conservation community. After the presentation, they walked home through the city streets, carrying their plant companions and talking about their next project. A community garden focused on endangered native species. I still can't believe we went from plant thieves to conservation educators, Marcus said. We were always conservation educators, Jamie corrected. We just had some unconventional teaching methods. Is that what we're calling grand theft flora now? We're calling it the beginning of a beautiful partnership. Marcus looked at Jamie, walking beside him with Fernando tucked carefully under one arm, and his free hand gesturing enthusiastically as he talked about seed collection protocols. His hair was as chaotic as ever, his passion for plants as infectious as the day they'd met, and his ability to find euphemisms for criminal activity remained unparalleled. I love you, Marcus said, because it was true and because some things needed to be said regularly, like watering schedules for succulents. I love you too, Jamie replied, even though you still overwater Fernando sometimes. I do not overwater Fernando. You totally overwater Fernando. Fernando likes attention. Fernando likes benign neglect, just like his plant parent. Are you calling me neglectful? I'm calling you perfect, Jamie said, stopping in the middle of the sidewalk to kiss him, while Francine rustled disapprovingly at the delay in getting home to her optimal lighting conditions. As they walked the rest of the way home, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the succulent section when a beautiful stranger had told him he was killing his plant with kindness. He'd learned about photosynthesis and propagation, about conservation ethics and proper watering techniques. He discovered that he was brave enough to break rules when it mattered, and that love really could bloom in the most unexpected places. Most importantly, he'd learned that the best relationships, like the best plants, needed the right conditions to thrive. Proper care, adequate space to grow, and partners who understood that sometimes the most beautiful things came from taking risks together. Fernando, nestled safely in Jamie's arms, seemed to approve.